first, it was China may have more ships, but most of them are just tiny coastal ships. Then it was China may be building a bigger combined tonnage of ships, but we build more carrier-type ships. Then it was the US is at least still building more nuclear-fueled submarines. But as of recently, it became obvious that sad lost bastion of US Navy supremacy has also started getting chipped away. This video will show just how many nuclear-fueled attack submarines China is building right now. How does that compare with the US, both today and in the Cold War? What the future production might be for both sides? We will also cover what new features does the Chinese Type 093B submarine have, bringing it ever closer in capability to US Virginia-class submarines. China has a huge shipbuilding advantage over the US, launching both new ships and submarines. Such details are not always equally reported by all the news sources. Today's sponsor, Ground News, can help with that. It cuts through the media noise. Ground News aggregates news from various sources worldwide. It allows me to compare perspectives and track how different media outlets shape the narrative. It saves me time, and I can use it either on my phone or on my computer. Take this news story on China commissioning a new generation frigate. Left-leaning sources cover that story much more often. CNN framed the story within rising competition with the US, while defense news on the right focused more on the ship's technology and features. What makes Ground News great is this info here. I can see that almost 80% of the sources have a high factuality rating. I know I can trust the story. Factuality is tracked by two separate factuality checking organizations. Plus, I can check who owns each source, since ownership often comes with its own bias. Another awesome feature is the blind spot feed. It highlights stories that get lopsided coverage, when one side of the political spectrum largely ignores a topic. For example, right-leaning media basically didn't even mention that Trump said he would probably meet with Putin in person soon. The Ground News' blind spot feed makes sure you don't miss such perspectives. Best of all, here's a special offer for my viewers. Ground News is giving you 40% off their Vantage plan, which I use to access all the app's advanced features. Already subscribed? You can gift Ground News to someone else for 40% off. To get the deal, use my link in the video description, go to ground.news/Binkov or scan the QR code on the screen. With Ground News, it's easy to stay informed. Try it out. To put Chinese production in context, we first have to know what US production is like. The main US nuclear-fueled attack submarine is the Virginia class. First boat was launched in 2003. Subsequent subs were initially launched at the pace of one sub per year. The period of 2000s was a period of low urgency for the US Navy, as no threats seemed possible. By the mid-2010s, the building pace slightly accelerated. Back then, each of the two US shipyards churned out a boat approximately every 15 months. When COVID hit, the construction schedule got all screwed up. A large part of that was supply chain issues. Those still persist. And shipyards themselves admitted that the economy changed then, and they still haven't really recovered from the change, with lack of workforce being a problem. Of course, a limited military budget was also an issue. 2024 was seemingly a good year with 3 subs launched, but that was because the previous delays in construction schedule aligned themselves that way. You see, a submarine takes a long time to build. When a contract is signed, some long lead materials are ordered and planned for, and workforce allotment is planned for. Then construction of smaller components starts. From that point to completion of the first large module of the submarine, Virginia subs lately took 40 to 55 months. Then those modules are laid down to be joined, and another 2 to 4 years usually pass until the sub is actually launched. Ever since COVID, it was usually closer to 4 years. Even then, some additional furbishing of the sub is needed, as well as tests, so another 18 to 24 months usually elapse before the sub is in service. Knowing that and taking into account announced construction starts on the next few submarines, it's likely 2025 will see the launch of one sub, probably 2 in 2026. That cadence is actually corroborated by the US Navy. Admiral John Rucker said the Navy is currently getting around 1.3 subs per year, on the average, and that the long-term plans are to get to 2 Virginia subs per year by 2028, and reach 2.3 Virginias in the early 2030s. That's on top of 1 Columbia sub per year. The Columbia class is strategic nuke submarine, first of which was contracted in 2021 and last of which will likely be launched past the year 2040. Columbias will replace Ohio subs, carrying intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. So the US is working on both the funding and adding workforce and shipyards to pull all that off. But even to their own admission, anything over 1 large strategic sub and 2 to 2.3 attack subs per year is unrealistic before mid-2030s. So how has China been doing lately? It launched its first nuke sub in 1970 and made 5 more subs by the year 1990. A decade of pause ensued. It wasn't until the 2000s when the next generation of subs appeared. From 2002 to 2018, 12 to 13 more nuke submarines were launched, so said period saw close to 1 submarine launched every year. Not quite as many as the US in the same period, but a definite increase. 2019 through 2021 saw no launches, a 3-year lull, during which China's massive new submarine construction facilities were being finished, and last redesigns of a new subclass were prepped, on top of many redesigns of the 093A class, 4 or 5 boats which have seen various design changes between them. Then nuclear attack submarine launches continued. 1 was launched in 2022, 3 more in 2023, approximately 3 more in 2024, though the jury is still out on the exact number. And in February of 2025, yet another one, all nuclear attack subs. The first image from way back of May 2022 showed a submarine that was roughly of the same dimensions as the previous 093 class, that had been launched throughout the 2000s and 2010s. We won't go into too many details here as we already did a video on the new Chinese subclass, so feel free to check it out. Back then there was no confirmation of VLS missile cells, and images themselves were of too poor resolution to confirm various features. Next submarine launch came in January 2023. For that too exists a high-resolution image. That one more or less confirmed the submarine uses a shrouded propulsor, meaning likely pump jet propulsion. June 2023 and October 2023 saw 2 more subs launched. There are no high-resolution images for those, only blurry blobs and freely available satellite imagery. Now, those can't be taken as proof in themselves, as the resolution simply isn't there. But there exist reports on the Chinese military published by US DoD. Here is the report published in late 2023. It says China launched 2 Type 093B attack submarines between May 22 and January 23. Those are corroborated by high-resolution images. And here's the 2024 report. It mentions 4 submarines launched. Sadly, it mentions the same period of May 22 to January 23, leading to a possibility we are looking at a typo. Year 2023 when it should have read 2024. Such complex reports are edited for months, so the fresh data cutoff was probably in the first half of 2024. Anyway, if that was the case, then the report really suggests 3 subs were launched in 2023. We have a high-resolution image of one of those, and for the other 2 we do have those low-resolution images, so it checks out. May 2024 saw something in the submarine launch dock, judging by the low-resolution images. The object remained there in June and July, when we finally got a high-resolution image provided by the analyst Tom Sugar. That would be the 5th confirmed Type 093B submarine launched since 2022. The dock was then emptied as usual, but in August 2024 there was another submarine in it, which remained there until mid-November. Binkov procured a medium-resolution image, confirming it. That was likely the 6th submarine. There was a brief period of empty dock in November before another submarine appeared in late November. Binkov procured another medium-resolution image, and while it's likely that's a new submarine, It's also possible it's a previously launched sub that, for some reason, briefly returned to the dock. The sub disappeared from view within days. Given the very large facility making the subs and the 2023 launches, it's plausible 3 were indeed launched in 2024 as well. Which leads us to February 2025, when the latest sub was observed, this time seen in highest resolution so far. That would likely be the 8th submarine overall. The 2022 single sub launch was warming up. 2023 saw the construction process of parallel construction lines find its bearings, resulting in 4 to 5 months between launches. 2024 and early 2025 saw that pace increase to possibly 3 months between launches. Curiously, across the shipyard's bay, a satellite image of 2 previously launched 093B subs was captured, also in February. It gave us further insight into subs' capabilities. Why were those subs across the bay? Chinese submarine construction facilities at Bohai shipyard near Huludao are quite large. Older subs were built at the western side of the bay. Since the new sprawling construction facilities were built on the east side of the bay, the original facilities remain to help out, do the fitting out of the subs, which is where the image of 2 subs was captured. The image shows 2 Type 093B subs being fitted out at the pier, with one very obviously showing the vertical launch system for large missiles like cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, or tactical ballistic missiles. Older subs, both US and Chinese ones, often use torpedo tubes to launch missile containers, which would then reach the surface and have a cruise missile, for example, launch from it. But more recently, navies decided that dedicated VLS welds are a better solution even for attack submarines. During the Cold War, dedicated guided missile submarines were used, like for example the huge Soviet Oscar class, but their designs and role often meant they were primarily missile carriers, not multi-role attack subs of today like Virginia or Russian Yasen class are. Chinese Type 093B now joins that rank of multi-role attack submarines. In mid-February, another image was shared by Tom Sugart, showing VLS well, part of which is clearly filled with VLS missile cells. 12 VLS tubes are clearly visible, with added room for at least 9 but possibly 12 more tubes, which just happened to be empty at the time. Curiously, before any good images of the submarine appeared, there were some models of the sub allegedly made by the shipyard. Some showed 18 VLS cells, while others showed 24. In retrospect, most of the features we now see in satellite images have been leaked by those models since 2022. The outer dimensions of the 093B seem to be the same as with the 093A. So the addition of the VLS module suggests there has been some serious internal redesign involved, from various 093A models to the now mass-produced 093B variant. In order to fit even 12 and let alone 24 missile cells, there had to be quite a bit of internal redesign. Most likely, more automation was involved, leading to a smaller crew needed. This image shows the crew of the previous generation 093A lined up. There are 80-something sailors visible, which is roughly expected for a boat like that. While US submarines have kept large crews despite automation, other countries did tend to make their crews smaller for newer submarine types. The improved Russian Akula and Yasen classes are examples of how much a crew can be reduced. So it's possible the new 093B class has in fact 60-something strong crew, leading to less space needed for crew accommodation. Since we've listed all those subs, let's list their dimensions as well, so you get a sense of where the 093B fits. It's nowhere near the monstrous Russian Yasens, which are so large because they are replacing both the Akula class attack subs and Oscar class missile carriers. 093B is roughly the size of the US LA class, a bit wider, but that's because it likely has ballast tanks between its outer and inner hull. Type 093's inner hull is, judging by satellite images of parts in the shipyard, close to 9.3 meters wide, slightly narrower than LA class, possibly leading to a bit less room for sound isolation. Of course, the 093B is a much newer design, so overall quietness level is likely better than the LA class, as indicated by US admirals. We covered that in detail in our previous video on the 093B. The shrouded pump jet propulsor is particularly visible, and it's one piece of tech that causes the water flow to be more uniform and causes fewer air bubbles forming at higher speeds and shallower depths. As bubbles lead to noise, the pump jet can make the submarine quieter. Here another comparison can be made between 093A and B models. The length is the same, but the propulsor is not. The B model has a large tarpaulin over its mid-body section, covering the VLS well. And in a further indication of design changes, the sail structure seems to have been moved a bit forward. That's further corroborated by images of the 093B in testing. As it's nearing service entry, multiple such images have been captured so far. Both sail and hull lines have been changed, with the sail moved a bit forward. So how has China managed to make such a jump in production? It obviously invested a ton of money into relevant industries over the years. From 2015 or so, it started building a massive submarine construction facility on the eastern side of the Bohai shipyard. We are now seeing fruits of that labor, with the submarine production pace accelerating. The facility itself is the world's biggest area-wise. Final assembly hall area is bigger than the Russian Sevmash facilities and bigger than the final assembly halls of both US submarine shipyards combined. Size isn't everything, of course. During the Cold War, US submarine shipyards were regularly able to launch 3 to 4 submarines per year. The 60s saw even more launches, but that was then. At one point in the early Cold War, the US didn't have just the 2 nuclear submarine shipyards that it has today. It operated 7 different shipyards. By the time LA-class and Ohio-class subs came, only 2 shipyards remained, which still build subs today. But during the heyday, half the attack subs and a quarter of strategic subs were built by the other 5 shipyards, which aren't operational anymore. The industrial shipbuilding base has since atrophied even more, so much so that the US basically doesn't build ships anymore. Lately, it's been making 0.1% of world ship tonnage per year. China has been making half the world's ship tonnage. Most of US shipbuilding is now tied to military contracts for the Navy. Navy's ships and subs are thus expensive, and the workforce overall is small. There's so little work that many workers often quit and don't get very skilled. We've covered the broader issues more in depth in our Constellation Frigate video. But Virginia-class sub construction is getting protracted and delayed, with subs on average 2 years late. Columbia-class is over a year late. As we saw, the Chinese facility may be only warming up. How has China lately been launching a nuclear sub every 3 to 4 months? The huge final assembly hall that does it can likely house large modules for some 9 attack subs at various stages of construction at the same time, plus half the modules for 3 more subs in the early module mating process. US final assembly halls for Virginias are smaller. Newport News likely has room for modules for 4 subs, while Electric Boat has room for 4 subs and half the modules for 2 more subs in the early mating process. While the US clearly has room to be faster than it currently is, the workers and the supply chain are still an issue. China seems to be using its work floor closer to its full potential though. A sub launched every 3 months means one of the 3 lines in the big final assembly hall likely contains modules for 30-something months worth of production, enough that the final mating process takes 2.5 years, comparable to what US needs on Virginias. But as we saw with experienced and well-run supply chains, that can be brought down to 2 years or less eventually. So it's possible we may see even more launches per year from that one assembly hall. China also had another additional final assembly hall for larger diameter subs finished in 2022, so the construction of strategic subs has probably only begun, and the first one is unlikely to be launched before 2027. We are sure to eventually see ballistic missile carrier subs there. The US also made a separate assembly hall for its Columbia-class subs, though again it's just half the size, pointing to a smaller capacity. It's plausible that at some point before 2030, when the new facility has warmed up and when maybe even newer submarine models will start construction, China will be launching 5 to 6 nuclear submarines each year, with 1 or 2 being strategic subs and 4 or so being attack subs. Those are production volumes similar to US production in the Cold War against the Soviets. And that's all not counting the old facility across the bay, which may or may not retain its submarine construction function. A war is not a given, yet if it does happen, China's nuclear subfleet is increasingly becoming a potent adversary to the US Navy. Given the pace we have shown in this video, in a decade or two the US Navy might essentially be pushed out of the second island chain area. If that happens, US interests near China might be seriously compromised. And remember, Binkov may talk about war, but only real peace can bring us all together.